Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with LA jazz pianist George Kahn on his 2020 CD Dreamcatcher. We caught up with him right after the November 9th release of the album to talk with George about this pandemic release, how he has been dealing with the new COVID-19 world, and so much more. Enjoy.
It's quite a time on the planet, that's for sure.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I just keep trying to be as positive as possible. That's all. That's my plan. Yeah.
Hope and positivity, yeah, I think that's going to take us a long way. But thanks for taking a minute out to really dig the album.
Oh, cool.
It's always great to see great artists on my radar, especially during this time. And I guess that's my question. You know, on the one hand, it's a bummer because we're in a pandemic, but on the other hand, it has to feel really good to be able to put new music out during a time where people probably need it the most.
I actually started the album before the pandemic. You know, I planned to do it in 2019. Originally was the plan to get it started, and then we went into the studio initially January. I don't remember the exact date. It was like middle of January, I think. We went in, and the original plan was to record 5 songs with a video crew and do videos as well as the instrumentals, so that I could use the videos to promote the album, and then gather people interested in it and funds, etc., to complete the album later in the year. So by January we had 5 songs in the can with rough mixes, and had these 5 videos. And then I triggered a Kickstarter campaign to raise funds and get people to pre-order the album. And that went into effect on March 1st. And at that point, we were still thinking, I know that we've heard rumors of what's going on in China and whatever else, but, I didn't think it was going to hit America. I just figured, this is just one of those things. I didn't think it was going to turn into a worldwide pandemic. And actually, we had a performance scheduled, like a house party concert scheduled as part of that for March 15th, I think was the date. Whatever that Saturday night was. And Saturday morning, I started seeing notices that things were being shut down, and they were recommending nobody go out. And early that morning, I sent emails to the people that had signed up for the party. I said, hey, we're still doing this, because we believe in music, and, we're going to do this, and you all should show up. And then about an hour later, I got an email from Pat Kelly, the guitar player, and he said, I don't think we should be doing this tonight. And wiser voices prevailed, and I canceled it that afternoon. And then the next day, basically, they shut California down. They said, no more gatherings, et cetera. So we were on, so that's kind of what happened there. But the great thing was that, people who are interested in the album, and the Kickstarter campaign continued. It was successful. We raised the funds we were looking for. And so then it was just a question of, well, when can we get back in the studio and finish the album up? And I had promised people that it would be done in 2020. Originally, I said we'd have it out by September, but it became clear that wasn't going to happen. But I felt a real desire to get the album completed before the end of the year and get it out to people, because like you were saying, people need good music, and they need something. And I think this album, besides being easy to listen to, it provides some comfort and some joy. So we finally got back in the studio in July. I kept trying to get the studio lined up, but the various band members, even though when we record, we're in separate rooms. Even considering that, a couple of the band members just didn't want to show up and do anything until there was more guidance, if I can call it that. And so we finally got back into the studio in July, and we recorded the balance of the album in July. And then it was, just trucking on through to the mix, master, and the final product. So that's kind of how it happened.
So what do you ultimately want anybody that decides to either download and buy this, what do you want them to feel about what you put out there, your artistic impetus, so to speak?
I think for this album, the impetus was to play songs that people recognize the melodies of, like doing like a standards album, but not the standards that everybody does. I'm not going to do Misty, or I'm not going to do Girl from Ipanema, right? I'm going to try to do things that people haven't played a lot or haven't done in the jazz style or haven't done in the style that we're doing. So there's originality there, but still keep it recognizable. I put out in 2018. I put out a trio album called Straight Ahead, and on that album I picked 4 or 5 songs that were like current songs, like by The Weeknd and Adele and people like that, and did them in jazz style. And I thought that's a cool idea. Kind of broaden my audience and like get young people interested in listening to jazz, maybe. So that was the concept on that album. And what I discovered was that those kids still didn't listen to it, even though it had The Weeknd and Adele on it. And my target audience, after doing actually I had hired a social media guy on that album, and after we got a bunch of a lot of streams on Spotify and this and that. And after the campaign, he said, we did a deep dive into research and discovered that your audience, George, is primarily men of the ages between 40 and 75. And I said, well, Dee, thanks for telling me something I don't already know. But that kind of was that plus calls from some of my fans saying, gee, we'd really like to hear you play standards. And I thought, well, then that's really what this should be. So that became the focus of this new album. And when I hooked up with Pat Kelly on guitar, Pat knows a million standards, and so we tossed ideas back and forth. What would be good songs, and we picked a bunch. And I think the other thing, as far as what's this album about, or what I want people to get from this album, one of my goals is to create an album that people can like sit down and listen to it and really dig it. Like there's enough interest and color and variation that you could sit down and listen to the album for an hour and go, that was really cool. But I know like maybe 2% of the people are going to listen to it like that. People are going to listen while they're cooking or while they're cleaning the dishes or whatever. And, I want an album that can play in the background as well, where it's like really cool when you're doing stuff. And then if you want to listen to it, it's really cool as well. So that was the real target I was aiming for. And I think we hit that target really well.
I agree. In these very strange times we're living through right now, what do you hope when we do return, when things get back to a place where we can perform and we can go and watch? What do you hope both musician and audience realizes about this time away from live music? Wow, that's a really good question. I'm hoping people realize the value of live music and acknowledge that. Certainly here in LA, one of the big fears that we have is that the jazz clubs are going to be gone. They're not going to reopen, and that may happen. I've been doing this long enough to know that, jazz music and jazz clubs are like the hydra. You cut off one head and 2 more spring up. But the clubs we have in LA, it'll be just a crime if the ones that have been set up don't get to reopen, because there's some really great clubs with a lot of history in this town, So that's my one hope, is that, it does come back to some normalcy, that people realize the value of live music and want to go out and support live music and keep that going. But that's a deep question. That's the first thing that jumps to mind, anyway. Well, I think that's kind of a fear here. When this started in Kansas City, our club scene was about as vibrant as you can even imagine. I mean, there was a lot of cats that were, coming from big cities to Kansas City, and Bobby Watson was getting ready to retire in March, and just things were. I mean, and I'm sure this is kind of mimicking a lot of places that are hotbeds of jazz in America, and it's hard to realize. I think my big thing right now is that why, of everything that has been a problem with the response of our specific government here, how we couldn't continue to get loans to come through. There was only one. It's not enough, and there's a lot of people that still have to pay rent and have very limited capacity, even with places that have opened up, which has been very limited. There has been there just hasn't been much daylight with that. So I'm shocked that there has been more support. But I think at the end of the day, I know in Kansas City, when I go to a jazz show, 95% of the room has a lot of money. A lot of money.
Right.
You know, so that's my hope, is that there's jazz aficionados and lovers out there that have, you know, grant monies in their minds when this is over, so that we can, you know, get these places back up. And I think there's enough benevolence in the world that hopefully can keep the tent going.
Yeah, I think so. You know, the two of the biggest clubs here in LA, Catalina Jazz Club, they've been running a GoFundMe campaign, and they've raised over $100,000 to keep their employees being paid, and, you know, keep the lights on as little as they can right now, which is good. And there's another club called Vibrato, which is owned by Herb Alpert. So I'm not too worried about them opening up again, because Herb's doing okay.
Yeah.
But the other thing, I think the other thing that has been good about this time period is that it has refocused jazz musicians to creating music and sharing it, whether it's on an album like I did, or just doing live streams, or, you know, putting stuff together. You know, I've been very excited about the amount of music that's out there, and, you know, showing up every day. I mean, I get 2 or 3 notices a week from people who are doing a live stream or a Facebook Live or whatever. So it's not like there's no music out there. The music's there, which is great. You know, people aren't just going, I'm not going to make music. People are, if anything, I think jazz musicians are making more music now.
Well, and I think the one thing that's the caveat of the jazz community is that you're not dealing with a bunch of people that got into this for the money and fame and notoriety. You got a group of people that feel it within their bones, and they do it no matter what. Not that they're not, you know, living and financially keeping themselves around, but, you know, jazz has always been kind of a profession of quote unquote hardship, and the basis of it is improv. And what we're living through now in this country, with the multiple layers of things, is improv in itself. And I would say artists out there that have the best tools equipped to deal with something like this jazz artists would be on the top of that list.
Right. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I'm planning an event on December 6th, a live stream event, and instead of doing a concert, I'm calling it Some Good Jazz News, and we're going to be showing some of the new videos from the album that I've put together, and I'm inviting some of the other people in LA and other places to come on if they have some good jazz news to share. So I've got people from Catalina Bar and Grill that are going to be on the call with me, which is great. But I did, just along these lines, I talked to one guy here in LA who's a sax player, and I asked him if he'd be on the call, and he said, I'd love to be on the call, but my some jazz news was that there were a couple of clubs that had opened up and having live music outdoors until last week, and now California's just shut that down. So I don't have any good news today. But hopefully that'll turn around again in a couple of weeks, you know.
Well, I got to tell you, it was very refreshing to see your CD in the mail. I heard some rumors when this all started that CDs were going to kind of go to the wayside. And for someone like me in radio, every week I get between 3 and 10 CDs, and it makes everything feel like the world's still spinning. So, especially when I run into cats that I've interviewed and I respect, and there's so many of them out there like you. So to see you putting this out during this time period, it's very reassuring. It makes me, and what I'm doing here, which is keeping a weekly radio show alive and keeping the music going, it really reassures me and makes me understand that jazz is alive. And that's the thing that I think I brought up to musicians, just kind of for you to think about, maybe have a comment on this. You know, I periodically would ask musicians, and more specific educators, because they have kind of a pulse on things in a different way, like, how healthy is jazz? Because they see a crop of all these young cats coming up, and I don't ever have to do that after 2020. I mean, I will not ask that question ever again. I've been astounded by one musician, whether it's Joe Lovano or a local drummer doing fill-in gigs in Kansas City. The amount of money, gigs, and appearances that have been canceled for one person has been absolutely insane. I'm sure you could attest to that. I'm sure that there's been just a plethora of gigs that in the early goes were canceled, and especially now that we have a new CD out, it's probably astonishing.
Yeah. There's no place to play. That's for sure. Yeah.
You know, you all are heading into a territory that I don't know that I thought that we would head back into, which is getting back into lockdown. I knew somebody that flew to LA about a week and a half ago, and they just said that LAX was empty, and it was the creepiest thing they'd ever seen. And they had to go to a funeral, so it wasn't some joyride. But
sure,
just the fact that there's such a level of closure still happening in this country, and there's been a resurgence. I think it's something we thought we were going to be over by this point, not completely, but at least to a point. Because I know in Kansas City, we started having some shows. We were having these drive-up shows where you could drive up, park, be safely distanced, mask, open the back hatch, and it was warm out. You could watch a show.
Right. And, yeah, they had a few of those in the LA area, but not that many. Yeah, it's I agree with you. I thought we were going to be kind of beyond this. My wife, however, is like, what were you thinking? This is going to
right.
She's figuring it's going to be a while, and I think she may be right at this point. So, yeah, I'm basically an optimistic person, Joe, and my feeling is that jazz is going to be around. It's not going to go away. People aren't going to not play jazz. And I do think that the young cats that are into the music are going to continue to. You're going to find some people that fall out, but I'll give you an example. In the classical world, I have a son, Evan. He's 27 years old. He's a professional cellist now up in the Bay Area in classical music, and his whole life ended like middle March. Also, everything closed up, but he's now finding that the groups he worked with are all they're trying to keep their donor base going, and so they're all putting together different types of either live stream events or other types of joint things. And it's chamber ensemble. It's not, which works for jazz, and people are still putting stuff together and putting it out there. And if anything, for the younger people, I think there'll be more opportunity when this is all done, because there will be some people that just go, I'm not going to go back on the road. The older cats are going to go, this has been enough to make me go, I'm done for now, as far as road gigs. And, I think there'll be more opportunity for young people to fill in when things open up again.
Yeah, I think so. I think that in a lot of different realms of our reality, Zooming and doing virtual things are going to open some eyes and cut corners. And, even when things come back, there's going to be still a level of people that are going to be recovering, I think, from this in a lot of ways, emotionally and financially. So yeah, I believe absolutely that jazz is something that's going to always be around. It's always going to thrive. And that's one of the reasons when this happened, I knew intrinsically deep down around the 12th or 13th of March, this is over with. And I'm very active with my family. We do a lot of things. I mean, we won that. I was going to say, at least you guys won a baseball and a basketball championship. And the Chiefs won, and the Chiefs won the championship back in February. And I think that might have been the largest last gathering in America before this happened, because our parade was around early to mid February. And, when, like I was saying, when March came around, mid-March, I was deciding, what am I going to do? It was very surreal. I mean, I couldn't listen to music for a few days. It was like everything was trying to process itself. And then I just did everything I could to interview as many people as I could. I probably interviewed 300 musicians in 3 months, about 100 a month.
Wow.
And I really was doing it just, this is a very specific raw time on the planet. Jazz musicians are already raw, and I just think it's very necessary for musicians to feel as though they're connected to the lifeblood of what they do. I mean, just as long as things don't get disconnected, I think that's the key to things. So, I think if we can feel connected to what we're doing, whether it's me as a radio guy getting CDs from George Kahn in the mail, or it's you feeling as though you have an audience that's still thirsty for what you're doing, that's what we wanted before March 12th through 13th and probably got it then too, but it's going to manifest in a different way. And quite honestly, life has a monopoly on us. We don't have any choice. We got to figure it out and stick through it.
This is true. This is true. Absolutely.
So,
and I certainly look forward to the day I can come to Kansas City and play a gig again. Maybe while. We'll be doing that.
Yeah, and we're looking forward to it too. And I know that we have some clubs here that are very open to having folks that come in from out of town, and hopefully we'll get back to where we were back in March. And I don't mean like back to normal. I know that's taboo to say, but I'm saying like getting to that point where clubs are hopping and people are playing and things are going, because this is a very benevolent town for musicians. Very, very good to people that are in this jazz craft. So it would be wonderful to be there.
Yeah, fantastic.
But at any rate, George, thank you for the music. Thanks for taking a minute out, and good luck with the album and getting through this very strange time on the planet.
Absolutely. You too, Joe. And thank you for setting this up. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Los Angeles, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to George for his time, music, and cool. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com. And for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.